This is the Best or Worst Podcast. And now, here are your hosts, Koji Stephen Sakai and M. Martin Mapoma.
Welcome. This is Koji.
And this is Martin.
And this is episode number 38, and this is the Best or Worst Podcast. We are recording another episode on Zoom, so the audio is not as great as it would be if we were in the studio, in my studio behind me, but you know, it is what it is. We love it. We're able to get really great people, and one of the best things about not having a studio or not having to be in the studio is we can invite guests from outside of Los Angeles or outside of Pasadena to come out and to join us, and that's why we have our guest today.
Outside of America.
Even outside of America. We had somebody from Australia and somebody from other places as well. But Jess Weiss, how are you, Jess?
Hi.
Hi, Jess.
Me.
Of course. Our pleasure.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Sure. I'm a producer. I do lots of movies. I do commercials. I do events. I do everything in between, and I love it. I'm in New York right now, so I'm very happy that we're doing this online as opposed to in person, as it would be quite a trip. And it's been a fun quarantine time lately. And I have a couple of movies coming out, and it's been hilarious because one premiered at an online festival. Today we have a drive-in premiere. So trying to make this work.
Can you tell us what the movies are?
Sure. The one I'm talking about is called The Subject.
Okay.
It's the story of a documentary filmmaker starring Jason Biggs. And basically one of the subjects of his documentary dies on camera, and he captures it on camera. And because of that, his documentary gets a lot of success, and it portrays a huge debate on race, privilege, but also as an artist, on how we should treat the people we're interviewing and how we should treat the stories and what we should do better as filmmakers. Yeah. I can hear you guys. Oh, there you go.
So wait, just to be clear, it's a documentary?
It's a narrative.
Okay.
Documentary filmmaker.
Got it. Okay. That reminds me of my first documentary class I ever took. This filmmaker, he did a documentary of this community, this indigenous community, and he cut it. And then he made a second video where he didn't do any edits, and he just kind of showed it. And it was really interesting to see, kind of, even when he wasn't trying to say something, he was still saying something, and got these very different perceptions of a story, you know, of the subject, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why the movie is called The Subject. It's like it's a very subjective thing we do, and we're not the news. It's hard not to be like, we're not facts, right? Like, we put a story together, and we put even a narrative, and in a documentary we put a storyline together, and we need to make sure that we're telling the right story. And by right, I also mean like not only right to the subject if it is a documentary, but that we're, you know, bettering society.
Yeah. Well, and Jess, I want to mention that you and I met when I was at the Japanese American National Museum, which I'm currently furloughed, so it's all good. Yeah, it's fine. I mean, it was like a part-time job anyway, so it's all good.
You love that place though, man. It always seems to be like a thread with people we talk to.
Well, it's because
a common thread.
The joke with Janum is that it's my my ex-girlfriend, that we break up, and then I'm never coming again. I'm never gonna come back again. And then they ask me to come back for something, and then I do, and then I stay longer than I originally intended, and then I leave,
man,
and then I come back, and I leave, and I come back. But
are you that guy that stays friends with his ex-girlfriends?
Not anymore. I don't stay.
Okay.
But just back in the day, just Gianna, yeah. Well,
it's kind of crazy to talk about that project. We just to mention, it's like, it was the Four Freedoms Congress. We brought 500 artists together from all over the United States, and it ended March 3rd. Honestly, if it had been 1 week later,
you'd have been caught up.
You know, we were already discussing so many coronavirus not methods and preventions, and like honestly a week later very likely would have been canceled. And this is personally saying, I'm not saying anything to do with the company, and this is a personal opinion.
Yeah. Well, speaking of coronavirus, how has it been? I know New York had a lot of challenges during that time. How was your coronavirus time?
Yes, New York has had a lot of challenges. I have barely left my apartment since I came back from LA.
Oh, how long ago was that? How long has that been?
March 3rd.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so since March 3rd, I've left my apartment maybe like 6-7 times. Yeah.
Ooh.
People, a lot of, there was a time that people were abiding by the rules and social distancing and wearing masks. Right now, it feels like nobody cares anymore, and it's great. And that great is very sarcastic. But honestly, I must say I'm lucky. I'm happy that project ended right before it, so I wasn't dealing with insurance claims and trying to get a project to stop in the middle. There was some things that I was able to finish from home, although all my current and upcoming jobs were canceled. And I finally had time to put paintings up and take care of my apartment. I moved last year, so I've done a lot of stuff during the quarantine.
And so, in terms of the your kind of your work, have you been able to write? I mean, are you a writer too? I mean, I don't know this side of you. So are you just a producer, or are you a writer? What do you?
I'm just a producer.
Okay.
So usually what I do that could work remotely a lot is that I get approached by writers, other producers, other directors that have a script and they're ready to start pitching. And I'm a producer and I'm a creative producer, but I focus mainly on line producing. So I create the budget, the schedule, and get the film in a good shape with a business plan and pitch deck. To get it ready to go finance. And then usually what happens is that in 6 months they come back to me and they're like, oh, that budget that we created, yeah, let's cut that in half. And it's like, yeah, sure. So you didn't raise as much money as you wanted. It's like, no. It's like, oh, got it. So let's cut it in half. And then I work creatively as well to make the budget cuts. Like, well, remember that scene that had 100 people? It's like, that scene must go. So it is a very creative position, but I deal with numbers a lot mostly. And I do script doctor as well, but a lot of the times it is from a producer side in terms of how to get the script in shape for financiers.
You and I need to work together. So after this we'll talk about some projects or something offline. Yeah. But all right. Well, I think we're at that point in the podcast where Martin and I will decide if we want to hear your best or worst moment. So Martin, what do you want? Do you want to hear Jess's best or worst moment?
Look at that smile. I think I want to go with best.
Because she's smiling?
That's a great smile, dude.
Okay.
Thank you. I actually have that I prepared for you guys, which is kind of a both moment.
Okay.
So it kind of works. One thing that I don't know if you know about me, Koji, but I'm Brazilian.
Yes, we talked about it because my son does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's why, remember?
Right. And you knew a lot more about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu than I ever did. In thinking about best and worst moment, I would say immigration is something so much fun to deal with. And the worst moment is usually the anxiety of waiting for that immigration paperwork to come through, especially after you've put everything down and you just wait. And there's no feedback and there's no anything up until basically the status changes online. And coming to that, the best moment was when it changed and I got my work visa, I would say. And it was, yes, that happened 5 years ago. And it's just an incredible moment. And I do think that the worst to best moment for me does come together because that anxiety, that buildup of anxiety just flipped and just wait, I got it. It happened. What? And it was such a funny moment when I found out because basically I had a flight back to Brazil. At the time I was already in the US and I was waiting for the decision, and I had a flight back to Brazil, and my parents called me and they were like, so you're coming tomorrow, like, you know, just make sure, what time is your flight again? I'm like, parents, I'm not hopping on a plane. And they were pissed and there were fights and they were like, I'm sorry, I need to wait for the decision. I know it should be here by now, but now I just have to wait. So a couple of days later, we have another call. Everybody's calmed down. They're like, what does it mean you have to wait? It's like, well, I keep checking every day the website to see what the decision is. It's like, what website? It's like, this website. It's like, where do you check it? It's like, you put the code here. It's like, where? It's like, here. And then I clicked on it and they gave me the decision. And it was like, you're approved, like your visa is approved. And I froze on a phone call with my parents, like, and they were even like, is this working? Like, I think she froze. And then I was like, guys, like, the visa was approved, like, this worked, it's approved. And they were like, so what now? Do you have health insurance? Like, do you have a place to live? I'm like, I literally just found out. Like, I don't know what to tell you. It was like, right this second. Give me a couple of days. I'll give you more information.
Wow, that was awesome. Did you know that the Brazilian passport is one of the most sought after by terrorists?
Wow, Koji.
Well,
Thanks for that. I appreciate that.
Well, for Martin, it is because Brazilian could look so many different ways. You could look really dark.
Oh no, I
look
get it.
Asian,
I get it.
Right? So I mean,
no, I get it.
Other than American passport, that's why America gave. It's really hard for American and Brazilian relations. Well, no, there's no dual citizenship, but the relationship between those two countries got strained after 9/11 because of America. I think put certain restrictions on the Brazilian travel into America, and then Brazil did the same thing to the United States. Right?
Well, yeah, Brazil does that a lot, but it wasn't after 9/11.
Oh, I thought it was after 9/11.
Well, that just happened, I think, like a year or two ago. And the visas changed, but there has always been a visa to come to the US from Brazil, and then there was a visa to go to Brazil as well. And pretty much it happens for both sides. It's just like, whatever you implement for us, we'll do it there.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's interesting. Your story is great because I'm from Zambia, Africa, and I came here, you know, back in 1984, and I've been here ever since. And that feeling of your paperwork coming through, because I got my citizenship actually a year ago, a few weeks ago. Yeah, and so I had been here all that time, and you know, as a young kid, didn't know really better, didn't understand the gravity of what was happening. Then as I got older and started working, moved out to California, I started to realize, whoa, I could get sent home. And, you know, I was already a permanent resident, but still not the same thing.
Yeah.
And then after Trump got elected, I had never heard of ICE until 2.5 years ago. I had no idea. One of my friends had been deported, and we didn't know where he was at first. He had been on Facebook, and all of a sudden he was just gone, and we were all looking for him. And one of my friends was like, ICE. And I was like, what the hell is that? That was how clueless I was. It's needless to say, I got my citizenship fast. And so I think Koji and I talked about this. That was probably one of the best moments of my life. Getting that citizenship was just, because, you know, I have a son now, and the thought of, you know, leaving him was just, I lost so many nights of sleep. It was crazy. So anyway, kudos to you.
Thank you. And it's interesting because, like, you know, you immigrate for a million reasons. And even right now with my work visa, I'm not considered a permanent resident. And it's like, you come for work, you come because you love it. You come to try out a path. But then there are so many things. It's like, wait, I can't vote. And then it's like, you lose a couple of the rights that you definitely didn't consider in this decision, but it really makes you think, and it really makes you consider things differently.
Yeah,
and
it does.
It's a huge decision.
Yeah, it is.
Are you thinking about becoming a citizen of the United States?
In 20 years, maybe.
Okay.
How long have you been here?
5, 6
years.
Yeah.
Okay, I was like,
not decades. 5, 6 decades.
No. I thought, like, have you been since you were 5 or 6 years old? That's what I, you know. Just wanted to clarify. That's all. Just wanted to clarify. That's cool.
So like the next step is, if the time ever comes, would be a green card, and then probably within like 10 years of a green card would be something to get its citizenship. So it's very, very far off.
Yeah. Well, that's cool.
When you think back to that day, or that time that you figured it out, were you starting to have doubts by that point that you're going to get it, or was there,
It's interesting because like the visa that I'm in it's called the Alien of Extraordinary Abilities. It's the artist visa. So you literally have to prove to the government that you're extraordinary.
Yeah.
And that, even going back to our beginning of the conversation, is very subjective in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I don't think I ever had doubts as to what I wanted to do, but it's hard if people don't want you to, right? And similarly with the current politics, it's also hard in terms of like, oh, there are a lot of people in this country that don't want immigrants, and it's also really hard to take that in. But that is like, it affects me, of course, but it's less about my decision. It's more about someone else's, which is even harder.
Well, it's not that they don't want immigrants. They just don't want non-white immigrants from Switzerland or something, or
no, pretty much.
Western Europe is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
so like, and I anyway. Better not to talk politics here.
Yes, I agree.
I was getting ramped up. No, my brother got his citizenship about maybe 10 years ago, and he was in Kentucky, and the immigration process was really hard for him, and it was because he was married to a Caucasian. And when he got his immigration lawyer, the first thing he asked him was, "Is your wife, black or white?" And he said, "White." And he goes, "Let me tell you, because of that fact alone, here in Kentucky, because you're gonna have a big problem." And I mean, he's a citizen now, but it was ridiculous. So, yeah, his old Koji's comment about they want people from Europe. It's so true.
Oh, that's always been this country. But in terms of, would you ever go? I mean, I know you'd visit your family and stuff in Brazil, but do you ever dream of going back to Brazil, or is this kind of the place you want to be for?
I mean, I never say never, but I don't see myself going back to Brazil. I appreciate Brazil a lot more not being there. There is a different feeling of home, and there's a different feeling of the beauty of it. I also grew up going to a German school in Brazil, even if I'm Jewish, because of course. So I always grew up with a combo of different cultures and a combo of different people, which was fantastic and also helped in terms of immigrating. But it like the industry there, I would love to go for a project. I would love to break films in Brazil, but I don't think I wouldn't go back to living there long term, at least right now.
And what part of Brazil were you in?
Rio.
Oh, Rio. Okay. I heard that's fun.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I've always wanted to go to Brazil for many reasons. It's especially talking to because my son also does jiu-jitsu with Koji's son,
Of course.
and talking to those guys about it. I've always wanted to go to Brazil.
Yeah, I've been to Brazil a bunch of times. There's a lot of Japanese Brazilians.
You have?
Yeah, because it's the second biggest Japanese population outside of Japan is in Brazil, mostly Sao Paulo, right?
Yeah.
And we've and so I've gone there a lot I've worked with the Brazilian Japanese in a lot of things, and
I didn't know that.
And how to deal with I mean it's always really interesting. I mean that community is very strong in ways that Japanese Americans are not, but it's very interesting.
You say that. I didn't know that, but I did know, like, it's funny because when I moved to New York, don't get me wrong, there's great Japanese food in New York, but usually the really, really great one is very expensive. The mediocre, cheap Japanese food in New York is very mediocre. The mediocre ones in Brazil are fantastic. There's always that level of like, if you go fancy, of course, you're going to get like great Japanese food. But if you go like basics, it's still really, really good. And I miss that like amazing sushi.
Yeah. Well,
Japanese food.
And part of the reason why is because during World War II, the Japanese Americans were incarcerated, whereas in Brazil they were not. The United States government actually asked Brazil if they would incarcerate and lock up and send all the Japanese to America from Brazil, but Brazil refused. Whereas Peru, other countries in Latin America, they actually did agree, and they were kidnapped out of their country, like in Peru, and they were sent to Texas. And so that's why the Japanese in Brazil, their relationship with Japanese culture is a lot stronger because there wasn't this break from being Japanese whereas as Japanese Americans, we had to make a decision whether we're Japanese or American. In Brazil, they didn't have that. So still Japanese, Brazilians still speak Japanese. They're still culturally very Japanese. So when I look at the Japanese Brazilians, I always tell myself, this is what my community would have looked like minus the concentration camps here during World War II. But that's the only reason.
So wait, Koji, the American government actually asked them to send their Japanese to America?
Yeah,
to
so
intern them?
the United States, they locked them in prison, but they
That's what I mean. Yeah.
So sorry, Jess, I'll go on a real quick tangent.
I had no
So the idea was they wanted to trade American POWs for Japanese people. And so they asked Peru and all these people. So like one day you could be farming in Peru, you're taken out of the country, land seized, you're sent to Texas, and then they were going to trade them one for American POWs. But the problem was Japan was like, who are these Japanese farmers who speak Spanish? Like, we don't want these.
Yeah.
Like, they're more mouths to feed. They're not actually helpful. Whereas the Americans were being sent soldiers, diplomats, people of quote value. And so those guys from Peru were really screwed at the end, because when they were released, they were technically undocumented citizens here in the United States, undocumented because they had been taken out of their home, forced to live here, but then they weren't citizens here. And so when the Japanese Americans got $20,000,
what?
No, they
got
don't.
Nothing.
Like, yeah, they were never sent back because the countries that they were sent from Peru didn't want these people back. So that's why Brazil has a special place in my heart always, because they're like, fuck you, America. We don't want, like, we're not going to do that to our citizens, you know?
It's really interesting to hear you say that, because I never heard it from that perspective. But like, I have, it's at the forefront of everybody's minds to talk about race and to talk about immigration right now. And one thing that bugs me a lot about the US is that there's always that person who's like, oh, you're Italian American, you're Japanese American, you're African American, whatever it is. And it's like, you're just American, And there is a beauty to it that talks about the origin of where you come from. But in Brazil, like, independent of where my ancestors from, I'm Brazilian, and that's it. And it's like, sure, my grandmother came from Germany, my grandfather came, and like, but there's also this branch of the family, whatever. But I never called myself like German Brazilian. Like, that term is non-existent.
Yeah. But I think it's because in America, the original sin was race. Everything has been based on race.
But
it still is.
And the US is interesting because everybody was an immigrant at a certain point to some extent, apart from Native Americans, Yeah. And it's like but it still was very much based, and it's not even about the race, because there's Irish Americans, there's Italian Americans, there's like, a bunch of white people that still catalog themselves. But it's still, I think there's something, and it might come back from like, the European way of doing that is like the nationalism of like, you're from this place, this is your culture. I'm not sure. But anyway, I that's one of the things that I love about Brazil is that, like, you're Brazilian, that's it. Like, there's no much more to be said unless you want to tell me, hey, you also have this other culture.
Yeah, actually, it's funny because one of my friends who's Brazilian, who's not Japanese Brazilian, but regular Brazilian, he was like saying like, when he came here, he said, I always consider myself white. And then he came here and he's like, I guess I'm not white. And I was like, I don't know what you are. You can be whatever you want to be. But like, it was
What's
really,
a regular Brazilian?
like, just not Japanese. I meant like, because I have so many, I mean, literally, like, I have like I spent.
I just wanted to clarify.
Japanese Brazilians, but
okay.
No, but I've had that conversation with myself and with other people too, because in Brazil I'm white, here I'm Latina, and I've had it both ways. That if I try to present myself like, and I'm white passing, I get that. But if I try to present myself as white, people are like, no, you're not, you're Latina. Or if I try to present myself as Latina, people are like, no, you're not, you're white. And it's just like, fuck you all. Like, whatever. I'm what I am. Stop this. This is ridiculous.
But to go back though, real quick on the race. I mean, I totally get what you're saying, and you know, that's one of the reasons why like Japanese Americans don't hyphenate, or you don't hyphenate African American anymore, or any of those, because it's like this idea that you're hyphenated. You know, we're just American. But I think a lot of it does come down to this original idea that, like, you know, I mean, America was the first country to set slavery by race, right? Because there's still slavery, but it's never been about race. It's always about like being poor, or, you know, it's usually on some other factor. It could be skin color, right? But it's never clearly all of these people are all slaves, or all these. So it's been very, you know, even in our Constitution, there's been, you know, slaves were 3/5 of a human being, and these people are citizens, these people are citizens. We're a really murky, weird society like that, you know, and I don't think we've ever really figured it out. Like,
that's why the issue is systemic, and I'm glad that like we started using this word very lately, you know, like of course systemic racism has always been a thing, but like now we're really talking about systemic racism. It's not about like, hey, look, you're racist. It's like the entire system is like the entire rules that were created.
Yeah.
You know, how to make it better.
well, wonderful. So where can people find out more about, oh, sorry, go ahead.
And just one note, do you know the name of the neighborhood, the Japanese Brazilian neighborhood in São Paulo?
I've heard of it. I don't know, not off the top of my head. What is it?
Do you want to take a guess?
No, because it's going to sound super ignorant. So
Come on, Koji, you can do it.
It's called Liberty.
Liberty. Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Liberty.
That's right. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, where can people follow you, follow your work, follow what you're doing?
So you can follow me on Instagram. My account is Producer Jess, so it's super easy.
Okay.
And also I have a website, which is jess-weiss.com. And there, I don't not only talk about the projects that I'm doing, but also I created a COVID page so that like the guidelines from the unions just came out today, which is super interesting. And
Yeah, I saw that.
website, yeah. So that, you know, I have a ton of COVID resources, and, you know, also if you want to talk to me, there's my email there too.
I actually just got off the phone with a production company, or production insurance, and it was a nightmare. I mean, it was like the kinds of things they were asking for. This one company was asking for 3 sets or 3 crews. They wanted me to have 3 crews. One for like a backup crew, or 2 backup crews and 1 main crew. And I had to test a certain amount of times, and I needed different places to eat for the crew, cast, and other people. It was really intense. I'm not going with that because it's going to be too expensive, but even the other places were really challenging.
Wow.
No, three crews are insane. That being said, I start a new project tomorrow, which I cannot tell you about, but we've had a lot of insurance conversations already.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. All right, well, thank you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jess, and thank you, Martin, for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Jess. It's been a pleasure getting to know you.
It's been a great talk.
And please, everyone, please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. This is our labor of love. This is Martin and I's labor of love. So please find us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter at Best or Worst Pod. And one of the things I could ask is if you like this show, please rate and review us on I always say iTunes, but it's actually Apple Podcasts is the new one. That's where most of the viewers are. That's where the most bang for our buck in terms of advertisers in the future. So definitely hit us up and leave a review.
And also, if you'd like to be on the show, leave us a message there as well, please. All right.
Oh, actually, come to our socials and find us there, because that would be an easier way for us because we don't get notified when people leave reviews. I don't get notified.
That's true. Okay.
Me. No.
Yeah, come to our Facebook and Instagram and leave us a message there if you want to be on the show.
Thank you so much. And
thank you, Jess.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.